Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of my complete bow build series. This is going to be the nocking point portion. So now you've got your new strings on, or maybe this is your first step if you decided to just use factory strings. What we're going to do is we're going to set your nocking point, tie in nock sets, and then tie in your D loop. You're going to need some serving. You can get away with pretty much any serving you want. I wouldn't go too thick or thin. This is just a BCY 3D, very good all around serving. You need needle nose pliers or D loop pliers, but needle nose work just fine. You need a lighter and then your D loop material. So let's get into it. So the one thing I forgot to mention that I always use is this, which is just a cut off arrow that I've had for a lot of years. You can use any arrow. I just like this one because it's not a full length arrow. Kicking around by my bow press. So what I'm going to do is I take that and I snap it onto my center serving, and then I'm going to get my eye lined up and slide the arrow until it is level with the burger buttonholes. So that's what I'm looking for when I put my nock on the center serving to find my nocking point. I want the arrow to be covering those two burger buttonholes just like that. That's where your nocking point should be. And then what I'm going to do is, this is basically your nocking point. That's all you got to do. I mean, you can buy the lasers and all sorts of crazy stuff to find your nocking point, but this works great. I do this on every bow I set up. Now we're going to tie in our top nock set. So to do that, I take a foot, maybe 18 inches of serving, and we're going to start on the top side. So this one, you're going to want to make sure is right up against that nock. That's really important because that is exactly where your nocking point needs to be. The nocking point is discussed in terms of the top nock set. The bottom nock set is kind of just a placeholder. So what we're going to do is take your serving underneath the string here, and we're going to do a double loop here. So like you're doing a square knot, you just do a standard square knot once. We're going to go through twice and then evenly cinch that down, not quite right up against the nock, but very close. Like leave enough room for one more knot just like that, and tighten that right up. From there, that should be tight enough. I can just pop that, I can just pop that right off. And now you're going to do that same knot but underneath. So it's like a square knot, except you're going to do one loop and another. And this just gives the nock set a really nice round shape. And make sure you're pulling it evenly. It sometimes wants to twist on you when you're tightening. And that one's going to go and be cinched up directly below the first one you did. You're going to do the exact same thing again. 1, 2. So now generally I will do this one above, so towards the top of the bow, because when you're fine tuning your arrow level, oftentimes nock high is favorable over nock low, and I would rather have to move my arrow rest up to get it level than down because of potential clearance issues with vanes on the riser. So I always do my second loop above this loop, cinch that one down, and once again the exact same thing below. Once through, twice through, evenly cinch it up below. And now we're going to finish the nock set with just a single square knot. So instead of going through twice, we just go through once. And we're going to cinch that one down directly between the two loops we just made. So once you get it there, squeeze it down and you'll see it kind of pops them apart. And we're going to do one more square knot, just a single loop on top of that to lock it in place. And now the way that I like to finish these is I don't like cutting both ends at the same time. That can cause them to pull out. So I will burn off one end, flatten that down, make sure that that's tight, give it a little cinch, and then do the other end. Like that. So there you go. That's one. The second one is exactly the same, but now we need to get our nock back on here. I actually have just a a nock from the same size nock from the arrows I'm going to be shooting. I'll put it on and press it right up against that nocking point. And then take the exact same amount of serving and do the exact same thing again. Except this time you're going to go below. And you're going to want to leave a little bit of a gap here. The gap is somewhat arbitrary in terms of size. If you go too big, it doesn't matter really, because you're always going to be pushing your nock up against this top nock set before you take a shot. But you also don't want to go too small, because you can easily get nock pinch at full draw. That is when your string comes to full draw and makes the triangle. If this gap between your nock sets is too narrow, then the nock can actually get pinched by the nock sets and your arrow flight really suffers. So the other thing I'll point out here, just while I'm tying this one in, because it's the exact same process, you can see about how much room I've left there. The other thing I will mention is that there's a lot of configurations here. A lot of people don't believe you need nock sets at all, that you can just go straight with a D-loop. A lot of people think you just use a below or just use an above nock set. The most important thing is that you use a top nock set for sure, because that is your nocking point. I always want to see people have a top and a bottom nock set, because when your D-loop inevitably needs to be replaced, then I can cut your D-loop off, or you can cut your D-loop off and replace it without losing anything. And yes, you can, if you only do a top and a D-loop, you can cut your D-loop off and replace it without losing anything, but D-loops are known to slide around, so you run the risk of getting the D-loop sliding up and getting nock pinch, which of course we don't want. So it's just easiest, safest bet. You'll never have a problem with doing two nock sets, one above, one below, with a bit of a gap. I would call the gap about a nock and a half is about what I've made that gap. So we'll burn that one off. Just like that. So next up is the D-loop. I take, you need definitely a 6 or 8 inch piece. This is too long, but I mean, it can't really be too long. It's better too long than too short. You want to puff up one end, really puff it up, and then just lightly burn that into a mushroom. If it catches on fire, I like to blow it out and just let the mushroom kind of naturally shape with the heat of the lighter. Let that dry. Now, if you're a right-handed archer, it's important that you do this exactly the way I'm doing it. If you're a left-handed archer, it's important that you do it the opposite of what I'm saying, and there's a reason for that I'll show you at the end. But because there's a certain way that this has to be done, I'm going to bring the camera on this side so you can see what I'm looking at here. So you got your D-loop material here with the mushroomed end, and what you're going to do is put it in a loop like that, and that's going to go behind the string on your top side. So this is the side here that my sight is going to be on, and you're going to take both ends and feed it through that loop. And I'll pause here for a sec so that you can, if you want to pause the video and figure out what that looks like. Then we're going to just cinch that up to the nock set and pull that tight. That's the top side done. It's that easy. Now the back side, you have we're just going to call this the tag end, is going to come around the back, over the front, and on the inside to form a loop like that. I'll cinch that down a bit because it doesn't need to be that big. Now the tag end is currently on the back side here. It's going to stay on the back side but form a loop, go over the top, through like that, and then you're just going to pull this top side tight, straighten it out. This is the point where you can adjust the length of your D-loop, straighten it out, put it in next to that nock set and pull it relatively tight. So you're just gonna have to maybe watch that part of the video a few times over and over. Once you get it, it's kind of like riding a bike. You just know how to tie a D-loop. Cut that off with, you know, what is that, a 1/4 inch or just under a 1/4 inch left over. Puff it out. It's important that you've pulled it somewhat tight to this point so it doesn't come loose when you do that. We're gonna mushroom at that end of it. Let that dry for a second. If you pull too early, you can squeeze it out. So with the needle nose pliers in between, you're gonna squeeze really tight. Don't be afraid to really squeeze. I mean, don't give it all your might, but you can squeeze it pretty tight. And now you can see what I'm talking about when I say for right-handed archers, this is the way you want it to look. And that's because the way we've tied this D-loop, one knot is coming off this side that's close to me of the string, and one side is coming off the opposite side, and that puts a little bit of an angle on that D-loop, as you can see, and that's really helpful when you're at full draw and you naturally are gonna twist your right hand, if you're a right-handed archer, to get your anchor set. There's a natural twist that occurs with your release, and this helps alleviate some of the potential torquing that you might be putting on your D-loop. So that's it. That is nocking point, nock sets, and D-loop. This is a perfect method. I mean, I've never had a single issue with this exact method right here. I can cut my D-loop off at any time I want and replace it if I want a different color, if it busts, if literally anything happens. In terms of getting your level for your perfect nocking point, we've set this up in such a way that if there is an adjustment that needs to be made, it'll most likely be made with your arrow rest moving up so that you won't have to move your arrow rest down and cause potential clearance issues. So this is a great method. I highly recommend you use it. Now we're going to go to part 3, which is installing your arrow rest so that finally you can shoot your bow.